Welcome to this recording of the November 21st, 2020 NMRA Coast Division virtual event, recorded at 7 p.m. in a special recording time. So first, Bruce is going to talk a little bit, and we're going to just look at a quick video on highball to Fresno. And then we're going to go ahead and go to Roy Davis, who's going to talk to us about cry cutting and how he's used it for modeling bliss in doing scratch building, and very impressive what he's done. And then the last thing I just want to do is talk about event timing. We changed this evening to 7 o'clock, see kind of what the feelings are about this versus other times. So essentially that's kind of our plan for this evening. And let me go find what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to play a quick video, which is the video of the highball to Fresno, which is the event, the Sugar Pine Centennial. So let me first see if I can share my screen, and then I will play it and throw it into full screen.
The Daylight Division is celebrating the centennial of the Sugar Pine Lumber Company by inviting the Pacific Coast region to its 2021 convention, April 22nd through 24th in Fresno, California. Fresno is centrally located within the region and easily accessible by all. We are offering an $80 early bird registration until the end of the year, and hope that you will register before February 20th to assist us in planning a great convention for all of you. The Wyndham Garden at the Fresno Airport will be the host hotel and features amenities like free parking, free Wi-Fi, an on-site restaurant, and 2 pools. Railroads have been the lifeblood of Fresno, with the Southern Pacific arriving in 1872, 13 years before Fresno was actually incorporated. By the end of the 19th century, they were joined by the Santa Fe. Now, Southern Pacific is Union Pacific, and Santa Fe is Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF, and they both are active in the Fresno area. Amtrak still serves Fresno with 8 trains daily. Fresno is now served by the San Joaquin Valley Railroad, with rails radiating out from Fresno. From the map, you can see how Fresno serves as a rail hub for California's Central Valley. We are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the start of the Sugar Pine Lumber Company that operated a large mill at Pinedale in northern Fresno, with rail reaching into the southern Sierra. Their Minarets and Western common carrier brought logs down from Central Camp in the heart of the sugar pine country. Employing hundreds at the mill and in the woods, sugar pine lumber was one of the first-class operations in the 1920s. They are well known for their saddle tank Mikados that ran on top-quality track and construction. To the east of Fresno, Southern California Edison built the San Joaquin and Eastern Railroad to help build the dams and hydroelectric power structure that lighted Southern California. We are offering 2 train excursions, one before and one during the convention, with dinner provided on both. The day before the convention actually starts, we will visit the Hillcrest and Wahtoke Railroad, a 15-inch gauge railroad near Reedley, east of Fresno. The railroad has over a mile of track, much of it dual gauge. The excursion includes a tour of the shop, a train ride, and an all-you-can-eat taco bar dinner. Every attendee will be entered into a drawing to actually run the train. The next day, the shays of the Yosemite Mountain Sugar Pine Railroad will transport us into the forests of pine and sequoia. After a chartered bus takes us from the convention to the mountains, we'll visit their shops, enjoy dinner, and take a 4-mile-long ride into the woods, with a stop halfway for entertainment around the campfire, before boarding the bus for the trip back to the convention hotel. We're also planning 2.5 days of clinics and already have some great presenters to share both prototype railroading and modeling techniques. Several clinics will focus on the historic logging railroads. Bring your modeling masterpieces for the contests. All the normal categories will be included, as well as an ingenuity and levity contest. Arts and crafts, photos, and People's Choice Awards will also be part of the contest. There are numerous quality model layouts around the Fresno area, and we are arranging visits to a few of them. Jim Neal's Southern Pacific layout includes track from Bakersfield to Mojave. This large multi-level mushroom layout is in a purpose-built 34 by 38 foot building. The layout is fully operational with scenery progressing. Bob Jakl's O-scale layout completely fills its own 34 by 80 foot building. From sea to the Midwest, the layout features 2,694 feet of track for its 117 locomotives and over 1,000 freight cars. Tom Davis's O-scale features Line-L locomotives with scratch-built cars on its fully scenic 24 by 36 foot layout. Tom's layout will also be available for operations. So speaking of operations, in addition to the layout visits, we are arranging operating sessions on some of the layouts. Sign-ups will be first come, first served through our website. Rob Briney's Sierra, Clovis, and Western depicts the area around Fresno in the 1970s with Southern Pacific and Santa Fe railroads. Primarily a switching layout, this 13 by 22 foot double deck around the walls layout is ready for operations. Bob Pethoud's Fall Creek branch is a small switching layout that will be at the convention hotel and available for operating sessions. Glenn Sutherland's Sierra Railroad is 3 decks of operations in a 12 by 50 foot space. The depiction of the Sierra Railroad in 1923 is historically accurate, featuring structures and industries of that time. We will end our convention with an awards banquet to be capped off by stories told by Mike Osborne, who has worked for both the Southern Pacific and Union Pacific railroads. Mike has been a model railroader since 1964 with his own operating HO scale layout. Because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, we will take appropriate precautions for the convention, and if we need to cancel, all registrations will be refunded. But we need you to register before February 20th, 2021. Don't wait, register now. And we will see you in Fresno.
Excellent. Well, with that, we'll throw it open for any questions or comments to Bruce. One of the things I think that kind of we all need to think about is that, if this all kind of dies down next year, do we want to have a convention? Because the problem that the team has is that if we don't sign up by the 20th of February and get enough people committed to come, then they can't proceed. So I think it sounds like something we need to think about, and that's why I put it up today. So any questions for Bruce?
So I have some additional incentives to sign up. First, what Phil says is exactly correct. We need you to sign up so that we can go ahead with the preparations. If we don't think we're going to have enough, then we have a cancellation time at the hotel. And so that's why we've got a deadline. But if you want to sign up ahead of time, if you sign up before the end of this month, November 30th, we'll put you in a drawing to win a cab ride in one of the shays up at the Yosemite Mountain Sugar Pine Railroad. You don't have to sign up for the excursion up there. You just put your name in, you register for the convention, and if your name is drawn, then you can go ahead and sign up. Second thing is that there will be 2 more drawings if you've registered by the end of December and you've purchased one of the excursion tickets, and then we're going to give 2 more rides on cab rides on the Shay. There's a big drawing, and this one is for anybody who registers for the convention before December 31st. We're going to draw 1 name, and that person will not only get the cab ride, but they'll get the bus ride up there and the dinner. The whole package will be paid for. If you register for the package, we'll refund that $95 for the trip. So that's the big drawing. All you have to do is get registered for the convention before the 31st. The other excursion out to the little 15-inch gauge out in Reedley, if you sign up before the 31st for that tour, then we're going to do a drawing and somebody will get to be in the cab and run the locomotive. So that's the four incentives that we've got. They're all listed on the web page. So if you just go to the PCR master calendar, you can find us, or just go to PCR. I'm going to forget. Bill Scott is the chairperson. Bill, do you remember what the web page is?
Well, I just get there by going to the PCR website, and you can see it, and then click on that, and it'll take it to our website.
Yeah, it's the logo's up there for the convention, and it's on the calendar.
But I'd like to add something. Okay, we've added another outdoor excursion. Jeff Johnson, most of you probably have heard of him with logging up the sugar pine, the minarets and western and all that. He wants to Thursday morning take a driving tour and go up and see these places. If you're interested, it's on the website. We didn't have it on that slideshow, but we've now got it on the website. It's a $10 fee. You'll drive yourself. He's got radios so he can talk to you, but he's going to take you around to all the different sites up there and just give you a history of it and take pictures of what's left and so on. And I want to add this thing about we're really pushing for registrations now, because last year there wasn't a convention. So our convention wasn't there trying to twist your arms in person. Usually by now, conventions have many, many more registrations than we've got. And that's why we're really pushing all the incentives to get you to sign up now. We're way behind. And we're hoping that by the first of the year, we can get at least close to normal. And like you said, February 20th is kind of our cutoff date with the hotel and the train rides and so on as to whether we're going to be able to continue it on. So don't wait. We need to know if you want to come. If COVID cancels it, you'll get all your money back. So
Bill, how many have registered so far?
There's been a few come in the last few days, but we're in the neighborhood of 30. So you can see that usually they're above 50, maybe 80 by now.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, guys, we're going to talk about this probably every week at the beginning of every couple of weeks, and we do this just to remind everybody, because right now it's $80, which isn't a lot of money to put in. And if we can have a convention, if we get to the point where, they say it's acceptable for us to do it, then we can do it. If not, it will end up being canceled, and we'll figure out what to do then in the future.
And consider one of the incentives we said is coming up next week. By next week, if you sign up, you will be able to be in a different drawing for the cab ride. And then you'll also be able to be in another one. So that's doubling your chances to be able to be in the drawings.
So Phil, do I have a couple more minutes to talk about some other things?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we know that COVID's here, and I have been active with the PCR SIG meet over in the Bay Area since about 2004. And we're going to have it again this year, but because of COVID, we can't do it in person. But if you go to the PCR website, go to the master calendar, there is a meet, the Bay Area Layout Design and Operations meet will be held on the 30th and 31st of January. We're doing registration now on the webpage. It's a free event. We're asking for donations, but it's a free event and you don't have to travel anywhere. But like all the other ones that have gone before, we will be having presentations. There'll be a design challenge. There are layout tours on Sunday, all virtual. You don't have to go anywhere. We're planning on having a time when you can meet the owners on a Zoom call just like this. We actually have one layout, the Silicon Valley lines, is going to be having virtual operations. So 4 or 5 people that attend the convention will actually be able to operate on that layout without going anywhere. They can stay home and operate on the Silicon Valley lines remotely. So they'll be the engineers on the train, and that's part of it. There's also an opportunity for any of the rest of us to watch the operations live on the Zoom call. So that's happening in January. As I said before, just go to the PCR webpage, check out the master calendar. I think it's top one on the list right now. So January 30th and 31st. And one last piece.
I'll also, Bruce, I'll make sure we get that and put it into the extra so it's there for anyone. So it comes out in the next email you'll get next week. So if you forget, you'll see it then.
Phil, I can send you all the links directly to the thing and you can send it out. One last link that I'm going to send Phil is the National NMRA Convention is going to be held in Santa Clara in the Coast Division. Really nice and close in July of 2021. And we're hard at work planning it. It should be a good convention. And you can see it on the master calendar also. You can just click in and find out what we're doing.
Excellent.
I'll take questions if there are any.
Well, if there are no questions, we'll go and close. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Bill. Everybody, if you feel comfortable, please sign up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to Ray Davis, who's going to talk to us about how he uses a Cricut in his modeling for scratch building, and just a really cool tool. So with that, I will throw it over to Ray. Let me make sure that hang on. Have to make sure I've turned on sharing for you. There we go. So with that, Ray Davis, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thanks, Phil. I appreciate that. Let me share my screen here because this is much better to look at than me. All right, so I'll minimize that. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, we looked at a great presentation by Jonathan on 3D printing. And this is yet another tool that you can add to your arsenal if you so choose. We use the Cricut for scratch building structures and a few other things that we'll take a look at tonight. Okay, so with that, I'll open up by saying that Dave Connery and I collaborated on putting this together probably a couple years ago. Dave is a knowledgeable historian on the Sierra Railway and a great model builder. and you'll have the opportunity to enjoy both of those talents as we walk through tonight's presentation. So tonight we're going to cover three things. We're going to try to cover a reasonable gamut of the types of things that you can do in the scratch building realm with the Cricut. We'll walk through the process that I use, and it's probably the same process that pretty much everybody else uses for scratch building, but we'll see where the Cricut piece dovetails into that. And then we'll finish up by talking about where you can get a Cricut, how much do they cost, what else do you need with it, and that type of thing. So with that, we'll proceed. And then also, if my internet behaves itself, we'll also do a Cricut demonstration here in a little bit, so you can get a feel for what it really looks like. All right, so a Cricut, this is a picture of a Cricut machine here on the right. So the Cricut is a machine that's used for cutting non-metallic materials such as cloth, cardstock, styrene, and wood. Cricuts have been around for, I don't know, at least 10 to 15 years, and they really were designed for the home crafting industry. So these projects that you see down in the lower right-hand portion of the screen, those were all created by the Cricut, okay? But when you combine the Cricut with your home computer, what we have found is that this makes a really effective tool for designing and cutting the types of materials that we use for scratch building model railroad structures. But at the fraction of a cost of, say, a laser cutter would be. So we've dubbed it the poor man's laser cutter. And so tonight's presentation will show how you can use the Cricut in various mediums. We'll look at some projects that were scratch built out of cardstock, styrene, and wood. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in. There's some natural breakpoints along the way, and I'll be looking to see when we have some that we can address. If for some reason I don't see your question, feel free to shout out. Okay. So the Cricut process that I use is really a four-step process. Okay. The first step is we develop the design and put it into a plan. And a lot of times that's a scale drawing. It can be a blueprint. It can be a photo. Just some way that you can take some hard dimensions of what it is that you want to scratch build and then put that into the system, which is really the second step. We want to put the data, the dimensions, and the key measurements from the plan into a Cricut Design Space. So Cricut Design Space is their front end. It's kind of a very rough and crude equivalent to a CAD, but the learning curve is actually much faster on the Cricut Design Space, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. Then once we got stuff into Design Space, I test cut some prototype pieces out of cardstock. And I do that to make sure that everything looks right. It looks like the walls will fit, that the doors and window openings are the right size, those types of things. And then lastly, once we're satisfied that everything's in good shape, then we'll cut some finished pieces out of our chosen material. That can be cardstock, styrene, or wood. And then, of course, the last part is to assemble the model. So with that, we'll talk about developing a design or a plan. It's usually easiest to start with a scale drawing, something that you can measure off of. And you'll want to capture all the key measurements and dimensions from that drawing in inches for the pieces that you want to cut. And that's an important point for Cricut. It works in inches, so you have to feed it inches. But you can do walls with window and door openings, roof panels, decking, roofs, all those things are really, you can create those on the Cricut. And down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that we're measuring a window opening. And one of the nice things about Cricut is its accuracy. You can measure and cut up to the nearest thousandth of an inch or hundredth of a degree if you're working with angles. And so with that, what I wanted to do is talk about and show you how to use the front end, the design space. But before we do, the one thing you have to do to be able to utilize design space is you have to have an account with Cricut. And it's free, and it takes about 2 minutes to sign up. You just need to go to www.cricut.com. And when you do, you'll see the screen down here at the bottom. Over on the right-hand side, if you click on design, it'll then walk you through the steps to set up an ID and a password. And once you've got that set up, you're ready to go. You do not have to own a Cricut or be connected to a Cricut to use design space. And we'll take a look at what that looks like now. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk through a quick example. And that's this shed front wall. And we'll actually create it together here in design space. But it's really made of 3 parts. We've got a lower part of the wall, which is kind of square shaped, 2.5 by 2.5. Then we've got a peak roof that goes up on top, which is a triangle. And then we've got a door opening. And so I'll walk you through how we create those particular parts. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my Cricut screen and hope that it cooperates for us. So when you open your Cricut design space, you'll get something that looks like this. And if you click on the new project, it will open up. And this is what they call their design canvas. And mine appears to be a little washed out, so you're probably seeing it as well. But as we start to get through it, hopefully you'll be able to see where we go. So what we want to start with is we want to start with the lower part of that shed wall. And there are various icons down along the left-hand border here, and we're going to click on one called Shapes. And when we do that, it gives us 10 different shapes that we can choose from. And we need to choose the one that is closest to what we want to create. So the lower part of that wall most closely resembles a square. So we'll click on the square. And it will drop just a generic square on our design space canvas. So let's talk about what we can do with that. So the first thing I do, I prefer to work in pieces other than they're dark. So we're going to make this one white. Okay. And if we are able to see that sketch of the shed wall, what we'd see is that the lower part of the wall is actually a 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch square. So let me make this just a little bigger so that everybody can see it. So if we want to make this 2.5 by 2.5, there's a couple of ways that we can do it. One is you can drag it and make it bigger and smaller. Also up here, you'll see that there is a size menu bar on top. And so the width is the horizontal distance, the height is the vertical distance, and we want to make this 2.5 by 2.5. Also in the middle that you'll see that there is a padlock. So that's called the aspect ratio, okay, the width to the height. If we keep that padlock locked, then the width and the height will move together. If we unlock it, then we can change the width and the height independently. So since in our example, we're doing 2.5 by 2.5, we'll keep that aspect ratio locked. And we'll type in 2.5. And then what we'll see is that the height is 2.5, and it's also moved the shape, or it's changed the shape to be 2.5 on each side. Okay. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to place that in a convenient place here on the design canvas. So I always try to line it up with one of the axes. You can move it if you want to, or you can use this position bar up here to type in the coordinates that you want. And so for this, I want it to line up with the X dimension being 1. That means it'll be 1 inch over from the left side of the screen. So if I type that in, it'll move it over to here. And then the Y dimension is the distance from the top of your screen down to the top of your object. And I want to make that 2 so that I'll have room to add the peaked roof. Okay, so now we've created the lower part of our shed wall. Now we'll add the peaked roof. So we go back to the shapes and we'll select a triangle because that's what the peaked roof most closely resembles. Okay, so here it is. If you could look at the sketch, you would see that it's 2.5 inches wide by 1 inch tall. That's what we want to make this into. Okay? So you can do that by dragging the axes around. I prefer to actually punch it in because my dexterity is not that great. So we'll make the width 2 inches, and we'll make the height 1 inch. And now we need to place it over on top of here. So, I'm sorry. I should make that 2.5. Made that same mistake earlier. Okay. So now we want to go over and place this on top. If your dexterity is good, you can match these lines right up. Mine in general is not, so I prefer to put in the coordinates. So this far left corner, we want to line it up on the 1 inch line for our position. And the very top, we want it to line up with the 1 inch on the Y so that these two will fit together. Okay. And then we'll make the color white so that you can see what happens next. So now we have our design, or our shed wall design, but it currently exists as 2 separate shapes. It's a square and it's a triangle. Okay, and we want to join those 2 shapes. And so we use an operation called the weld. We want to weld the triangle to the square. Okay, so the way we do that is we paint both of those. That selects it. And then down here, I hope you can see in the lower right-hand portion, there's an icon with a weld underneath it. So if you'll keep an eye on this while I click the weld icon, you can see now that it's joined those 2 shapes. So it's no longer a triangle and a square, but it's actually a unique shape that you have that you've created here in Design Space. And also up here, if you make a mistake, you can always do the undo button. That'll take us back to where we started if you wanted to make a change. But in this particular case, we'll keep it welded. Okay. And then the last thing we want to do is that we would like to add a door opening. Okay. So the door opening most closely resembles a square. So we'll select a square. And the dimensions of that square are 1 3/4 inches wide by 2 inches tall. So since the dimensions are different, we'll unlock the aspect ratio. We'll make it 1 3/4 wide by 2 inches tall. And now we'll want to place that here in our wall. So we have 3 choices on how we do that. One is we can drag it over here and drop it in. Obviously we want it centered on the wall and we want the bottom edges to line up. So you can drag it there, or you can do the arithmetic to do the positioning, or Cricut gives us another tool called the Align tool. And you can see that right here. And so if we click on that, that actually gives us the options for aligning these shapes. So that we said that we wanted to center it horizontally. And we also want to align the bottom edges. And at that point, we've created our shed wall with a door opening. And that's really all there is to it. It's pretty straightforward. The learning curve is fast. Once we've created it, then the last thing we'd want to do is save it. So if we go up here to this portion of the screen and save it, and then we and click save, this shape will be saved to your account. Before I do that, I want to go back to my presentation because there's one other thing that I would like to show you. Okay. So once you click on save, I've lost my way in the wilderness here. Once you click on save, then it will take that project title and it'll display it on your canvas. So you'll be able to differentiate this projects from other projects. Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions at this point, so we will continue. So that's all there is to Design Space, but before I leave it, I wanted to address one more question that I get asked quite a bit, and that's if I have a project, say in O scale, is there an easy way in Cricut that I can convert it to HO? Or do I have to go in and redraw it basically in HO scale? And the answer is yes, there's a very simple way to do that. And that's what I wanted to show you here. So the first thing that you have to do is the arithmetic, for the scale conversion. So O scale is 1 to 48 and HO is 1 to 87.1. Convert O to HO, you have to divide 48 by 87.1 and you get 0.551. Or HO is 55.1% as big as O scale. So once you do that conversion, then you need to convert only one dimension from your model or from your project, and then I'll show you what we'll do with that. So our shed wall, we'll say that's our O scale project and we want to convert it to HO. Okay. And so we'll take the width, which is 2.5, and multiply it by 0.551. And so our width in HO would be 1.378. And so here's what we do with that. So this is where we started. This is our O scale shed wall. And then we want to make sure we keep this aspect ratio, the padlock locked, and we'll input 1.378 for the new width. And then when we hit enter, what you'll see is that it's converted everything on the screen to HO. So it's made the height 1.929. It's taking care of the door openings. It's taking care of everything else. So with just a couple of keystrokes, you can convert a project of any scale to any other scale fairly quickly, and I found that to be a pretty useful portion of the tool. Okay. And so we haven't talked about cutting things out yet, but if you were to cut out those two pieces, then that's what this would look like with the O scale one on the left and the HO on the right. All right. Well, if there are no questions on that, then we'll move on. But that's design space. It's very easy, I think, to use. There are a couple of things, because it's on the simple side, it doesn't have some of the flexibilities that CAD and some of the other programs are. But I'll be honest, I have not found anything that I couldn't do yet in design space with everything I do.
So Ray, how does it work for scribing and some of those other things than pure cutting? Is it the same? You just define the lines where you want scribing to happen, or?
Yes, you would do that. Now, what I'd have to say, Phil, is Cricut is meant to cut. So when you ask it to cut something, it's going to assume that it's going to cut through it. But
Right.
there are a couple tricks you can do, particularly if you want to make some scribe lines in wood or in styrene and not cut through all the way. And
Okay.
I'll cover those as we go through there.
Oh, excellent.
But that's a good question. I'll make sure I don't miss that. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and take our process and we'll walk through several projects and try to give you a better idea of what you can do with the Cricut. So this first one, we're going to take a look at Sierra Railway Cooperstown Depot. This is one that we constructed in the HO scale from wood. So first, a little background on the Cooperstown Depot and the Sierra Railway. So the Sierra Railway was and still is centered in Oakdale, California, and that's on the eastern edge of the Central California Valley. And it served up into the foothills. It went from Oakdale going up through Jamestown and Sonora, serviced the Pickering Lumber Company and Standard, and went up to Tuolumne where the West Side Lumber Company was. And so here's Oakdale, and here's Cooperstown, where our depot was. So the Sierra started building in March of 1897 eastward from Oakdale. And by June of that year, they had regular passenger and freight service inaugurated. Our depot, which is our modeling subject over here in the picture on the left, was built in 1898. It's a two-story wood depot and a one-story wood freight house. A year later, a water tank was added. And 2 years after that, they added some stock pens. And Cooperstown really came into its own in the 1920s when they were doing the big reclamation projects, when they were building the Don Pedro Dam, the Hetch Hetchy, and up here in the Malones. Because once you come out of Cooperstown and start heading east, you're starting to go upgrade. And so a lot of the helper engines to push those gravel trains up the grade were based out of Cooperstown. But eventually the business ran dry and the Depression hit. And unfortunately, in December of 1931, the Cooperstown station was closed and it was dismantled. And unfortunately, there's absolutely nothing left there today other than some rusty rails from a Y track that's out there in the Central Valley Sun. So with that history, let's talk about how we can build one using the process we've talked about already. Okay. So the first thing you have to start out with is a plan. And for our plan here, we used a scale drawing. It was originally constructed by Glenn Sutherland, and then Dave and I made a few additions to it. But all of the dimensions that we have for the walls, for the roof, for the windows and the doors, all were measured off of this in inches to input into Design Space. Okay. And as you know, with any design project, this part of the process is where all the work is. The better and a more thorough and complete job we do at this point, it makes everything else a lot easier downstream. Okay. So this is what Design Space would look like for the depot walls. And I'll just kind of walk through at a high level some of the functions that we use to get here. So everything on here started out being a square. And so for this side wall, obviously we made it a rectangle. And then we used the square for this cutout. But there's also a function in Design Space called slice. So recall that weld is what you use to stick two pieces together. Slice is what you use when you want to cut a portion of it out. And so we cut this portion of the overhang out using the slice command. And then We use the align functionality to get all of the windows lined up to the same type of height. And so when we've gotten done here, we've got our two side walls. This is the upper end wall on one end and the lower end wall. And this is the big end wall. So those are the pieces of our depot walls. Similarly, this is the hip roof. So obviously we use triangles for the hip roof. This is the end panel. And you can create a polygon shape like this with lines in the design space, but it's kind of not that easy. So what I did is I created a large triangle, and then I just used the slice command to slice off the top because I had all these dimensions. Okay. And this is what the freight shed looks like. So this looks a lot like our demo that we saw earlier, with a few squares and rectangles added in. Anybody have an idea what these are? Well, these are the window glazings, okay? And so we use Grant line windows, and for the large windows, there's a sets of upper and lower panes. So that's what these two rows represent. So window glazings for those, and then this last row is for the small window. I ended up cutting a lot of these because I don't know about you guys, but at least at my house, small clear pieces like this love to jump off the table and down into the carpet and never be seen again. So we cut a few extra to be able to use for that. But since it'll cut to the nearest thousandths, it works for window glazings quite well. So step 3, we're going to cut some prototypes out of 80-pound cardstock. Okay, and let's walk through the steps for those. All right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to select the items in design space that you're going to cut. And you do that by painting those. Okay. Then the next thing you want to do is there's an icon right next to the weld down here called attach. And you have to use the attach icon. So what attach does is it freezes the spatial relationships of all these individual pieces, okay? All of these rectangles, the walls, the door openings, all that type of stuff. It tells the rest of Cricut that we don't want those to move. If you don't use the attach icon, then what Cricut will try to do for you is it will try to optimize the use of your materials. And it will freely take and rearrange all these various shapes so that you don't cut any more material than you have to. And so when you go to the next stage, you'll say, gosh, that doesn't look at all like what it is I wanted to cut. Well, and 9 times out of 10, it's because you forgot the attach. It's a mistake we all make, but it's a fairly dramatic one. So just remember that. So then once you've attached everything, then the next thing is you'll want to do is you'll want to click on the Make It button, and then you'll get a screen that looks like this. And this is Cricut's way of saying, this is what I think that you want me to do, okay? And it's given us, what this is kind of a silhouette of the cutting mat. But it's places the pieces that we've said that we wanted to cut there. And it'll give you a chance to evaluate it and say, yes, that's what I want to do, or no, it's not. If it's not, it's easy to go back and change it electronically at this point before you cut anything. And if it is, then you can click on continue. Okay. So we're going to continue because we know this one is right. Then the next piece is where you set up the machine. So there is a menu of many, many different materials that you can choose from to cut. We're going to make ours out of 80-pound cardstock. So we select this material from the menu, and that tells Cricut, okay, we want to cut it out of 80-pound cardstock. In step 2 down here will then tell you how you need to set up the machine. So it says you need to load the fine point cutter in clamp B. You need to load the material on the cutting mat, and then press the go button. So this is what that looks like. Okay, so this is the Cricut machine. It works like the old 2-pin plotter. So there is a carriage that moves back and forth horizontally, and then there is the cutting material or medium that moves vertically. Okay, and so you can load a pen and a cutter into the carriage, and your cutting mat is like a self-healing mat with just some light adhesive on there. And so you'll put down your piece of paper on the cutting mat, load it into the machine, and then when you press the go button, the cutter will do its job. So on the left-hand side, you can see that we've loaded the cardstock. And on the right-hand side, you'll see what it looks like after we've cut the cardstock. And when that comes out of the machine, this is what it looks like. Okay, so the green is the cutting mat, and you can see where it's cut in the upper portion of the screen. These are the depot walls. In the lower portion of the screen, that's the freight shed walls. And then I've included a few pieces here for the window glazings. And when you strip all the excess pieces away, that's what it looks like. And now that we test cut our prototype pieces, I test fit them together. I make sure that the wall edges open right. I make sure that my Grand or Tichy windows and doors drop into the opening right. And if you find that something's not quite correct here, it's a lot easier to go back and fix it at this point than it is if you've already cut a piece of wood and styrene. Also, when I'm doing window and door openings, what I find it's easy to do, the easiest way to do it is I will measure the opening with a set of dial calipers, and then I'll round up to the nearest 5 thousandths. And that makes the opening just slightly bigger than our window and door, and they should be able to drop right in there. So now we're ready to go ahead. Oh, I'm not quite finished. And so we test cut prototype pieces for our hip roof here. This is out of cardboard. It's called chipboard. It's the same type of cardboard that you see on the back of a writing tablet. Okay, and so we cut it out of a little heavier material just because it was easier to work with when we stuck it all together. There's the test pieces for our hip roof. All right, and now we're ready to do our finish cuts out of wood. Okay. All right, no questions yet. So I usually do the cutting by material type. So the depot walls were made out of clapboard. So we attached a sheet of clapboard here to our cutting mat, and when it came out, you can see where it's made the cuts. And then if we strip all the excess material away, and here are the pieces. And I usually go back and check the window and door openings and maybe do a little bit of sanding at this point as well. The freight shed, however, was made out of board and batten. So we used a different piece for this. Unfortunately, the board and batten siding isn't wide enough to take care of the whole wall. So we took 2 pieces and butted them together. Also, when you use heavier material on the mat, I find it's easiest if you just use some blue painter's tape to kind of tape down the edges. That'll make sure that your material won't shift on you as the mat is moving back and forth along with the cutter blade. And then when it comes out, that's what it looks like. And this is half of our hip roof. We made that out of scribed roof panels, so the scribed side will go down. That's what those look like. And one thing about cutting in wood is it does make a bit of a mess. You get lots of chips and sawdust and little parts and pieces that will break off, and they just love to attach themselves to the adhesive on your cutting mat. But I find that if you use some blue painter's tape like a dauber, that you can get up most of those pieces just by tapping it down. The other way that you could do it is you can scrape them off, but when you do that, you also scrape off some of the adhesive off your mat. So if you do it this way, I think it's a little bit cleaner, and it'll prolong the life of your cutting mat. And now we'll get to the assembly point. Okay. So this is where Dave started to assemble it. We got the walls and the roof put together. And over here on the right, everything's been assembled and painted, and we're just waiting for shingles. Similarly, for the freight shed, we've got the roof on and the corners are trimmed. You can see where we use bracing in the middle. And here everything is ready to go, except for the shingles. And here's what the finished product looked like after everything's been put together. I will say that we did not use the Cricut for our deck right here because it was just as quick and easy to make it by hand as it was to cut out these pieces. So that's the finished product, and you can compare it to the original over here on the left and see how close we came to hitting the mark. But that is a typical project out of wood. Any questions on that before we move to styrene? Okay.
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure.
When you cut this with, I can see with the cardstock, they just have you, I don't know exactly what it is, but something that's similar to a number 11 blade and X-Acto to cut it with. What do you use with the wood? Is it a similar, just a blade cut?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, it is. It's powerful enough to cut through the wood and hold it.
It is.
Okay.
So that's actually an excellent question. Thanks for asking that. So it uses a knife blade, and we'll talk about the knife blade a few times through there. And the knife blade just looks like the end of a number 11 X-Acto blade. And the way that Cricut makes its cut is it makes a series of passes. So
Okay.
for something real thin like cardstock, it only needs to make one pass. For something thicker like 16th inch basswood, it might make 15 passes. And with each successive pass, it cuts deeper and pushes down harder. And it actually pushes down harder than we can. It can exert anywhere between 100 and 200 pounds of force, depending on what the material is that you're cutting through. But yes, if you looked at the end of the knife blade that was used to cut the wood on these walls, it looks just exactly like the end of a number 7, or I'm sorry, a number 11 X-Acto.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Great question. Any others before we move on? All right, well, feel to hop in. Okay, so the next project we're going to look at is a styrene one. Okay. So this is a styrene welding shed, and we made it out of 40,000 Scribed styrene sheet. So if we take it via our process, the first thing we need is a design or a plan. And so this one came out of 21 projects by Bob Walker. And this is an HO scale drawing that I took right out of the book. And I was able to take all the dimensions in inches that we needed right off of this drawing and input them into design space. And so there's really two parts to this building. There's the main part of the shed and then kind of a lean-to that's over here. And so if we look at those parts and pieces, this is what it looks like when we've input them into design space. Okay? So nothing here that we haven't talked about already tonight. Very straightforward with the side walls, and then we've got the part of the lean-to here. So we go ahead and test cut the prototypes out of cardstock. And then we test fit the window openings. In this particular case, we also had a freight door, but we scratch built the freight door on its own. So there wasn't anything that we needed to test there. Then we're ready to cut it out of styrene. Okay, so we used one sheet of 40,000 Scribed styrene, and the Scribed run vertically. So 40 thousandths is a fairly heavy piece, so you can see that we taped it down pretty well. And then when it came out of the cutter, this is what it looked like. Styrene is harder to cut for Cricut than wood. And when you get in, I found that about 40 thousandths is about as heavy as you can go and still have success with it cutting all the way through. It also takes quite a few number of cuts for it to be able to make that. And I found with this particular one that there was actually a couple places that it hadn't cut quite through, so I had to use my hobby knife to finish the cutting job there. There's one other thing about styrene is that it always leaves this lip around the edge. And so you'll have to take each of your pieces and make sure that you either file or sand that down or scrape it off. It's not a big lip, but it's something that you will have to remove. Okay. And then we go to the assembly stage. So these were the adhesives that were used. You can see that we're getting into bracing it with 1/8" styrene. And the walls are going together, and there's the roof with the rafter tails. And then this was painted and shingled with paper shingles. And there it is on a small diorama with somebody welding inside. So this was a fairly easy project to do. If I was going to do it again, though, and I wanted something to be 40 thousandths, Cricut actually cut through 20 thousandths much easier than it will 40 thousandths. And so if I was going to do this again, I would probably cut 2 sets of walls. I'd cut one 20 thousandths Scribed siding and one plain, and then glue them together. Since Cricut will make 2 identical sets of walls, you don't have to worry about anything lining up. So that would be one option. The other one would be is that it kind of gets back to the idea of scribing. If you're making large enough pieces, you can let Cricut say cut halfway through, and then you can stop the operation. And then you can use those as score lines and just break the parts apart. And I've done that as well. So you've got several options here. Any questions on styrene before we move to paper? All right. So one of the nice things about Cricut is that you can use it to do fairly rapid prototyping of mock-ups. So mock-up, at least by my definition, is a temporary building. We want to get an idea of the general shape and the footprint and lay it on our layout to see if it's going to fit. Do we need to change it, modify it, those types of things. So we'll make an engine house mock-up out of 2 different materials, and I'll show you a couple additional techniques as we go through this. So step 1, we need a design or a plan. So I found a classic miniatures kit that I had for an engine house, and I took all of the main dimensions for it off of here. And then when I put it into design space, so this is for the one out of 110-pound cardstock. What you'll see here is I put some fold tabs on the ends of the end walls. Okay? And this dotted line here, that represents a score line. So one of the tools that comes with your Cricut is a scoring tool, and it basically puts a crease in your material. So, so what I did is I created those tabs, and then I put crease lines in so that we could fold the corners and that way stick the end walls to the side walls. And then similarly, all the windows and door openings here will be drawn in with a pen. And then we can see that I put a score line at the pitch of the roof, or the top of the roof. So this is what it looks like when we go to do step 3, which is cutting our test prototype pieces. Okay. So we loaded it with a pen, and we loaded it with our fine point blade. And one thing nice about Cricut is it keeps track of the tools we're using. So I used 2 different pens, and I used not only the fine point blade cutter, but the scoring wheel as well. And so it knows when it's time to switch pens. It knows when it's time to go from the fine point blade cutter to the scoring wheel, and it will stop until you pull one pin out, put the other one in, do those types of things. So here's what our prototype looked like the first time I did it. And you can see the scoring lines or the creases here. And the pens for putting in the window and the door opening, as well as the score down here at the peak of the roof. Then I went back and I made a couple of changes, and then this is what it looked like. Okay. So we've used the scoring line to bend our tabs and our roof, and we've drawn in our a little better window and door opening, and I used the thicker pen for the front door. So I also included, I think, an intermediate wall just to give it some strength, but when we put it all together, that's what the 110-pound cardstock mock-up looked like, and we're ready to set that on our layout. I made another one out of chipboard. So recall that chipboard is the kind of cardboard that comes on the back of a writing tablet. Okay. In this particular case, because this is thicker, okay, this is about 80 thousandths inches thick. We don't need fold tabs. We could use them, but it was easier just to glue things together with strip wood. So there's the walls, and there's the roof. There are twin sons of different mothers. So I would consider the one on the right out of 110-pound cardstock to be something extremely temporary. If I wanted a mock-up that I was going to leave in place for a while and needed to be able to get bumped around, then you could certainly do it out of cardstock. Or I'm sorry, out of chipboard. And if you wanted to go back and make some changes, I mean, you could certainly have a new mock-up designed and put in place probably within 20 minutes. So that's one of the advantages of this. Any questions on paper? All right. Well, let's take a look at some additional examples of ones that have been done. So this is a mock-up of a speeder shed that I did. The prototype is actually in a ghost town called Cobre, which sits in northeastern Nevada at what was the northern end of the Nevada Northern Line. There are only two buildings left, the block engine house and this particular speeder shed out of wood. And so at some point I'm gonna make a wood molding out of this. But basically I use the chipboard, and then I just use the pen to put in the board and battens and other key structural components. This is another one. This was an O-scale building that was on a friend of mine's layout, and I really liked it and decided that would be a good Cricut project. So I rebuilt one of my own. And this particular project really doesn't have anything to do with scratch building, but I wanted to just show it as a way that shows some of the versatility that Cricut has. So One of the projects that I'm currently working on is a restoration of Missouri, Kansas, and Texas steam locomotive at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. And this is the last MKT locomotive of its kind. All the rest have been scrapped. And so a group of us are trying to restore this back to its 1940s appearance. And it's for a number of years has been missing its original pilot or cowcatcher. So that was one of the projects that we tackled last year. So it was a bit of a challenging project in that, you know, there are no other steam engines around and no other pilots to use as an example, and there were no drawings that we could find. So, but we were able to take this photograph, which is pretty much of a straight-on shot from a different locomotive, and between that and the dimensions we were able to take off the steam engine to start to put the parts and pieces together. And so one of the ways I did this, I built progressively larger scale models and refined the dimensions as we went through it. So first it started out as an O-scale model, and then I built this 1/6 scale model. So I used the Cricut to come up with a pattern for the pilot. This is what it would look like if it was flat. And then I built this model. So this model is 110-pound cardstock on the front, and it's styrene on the back. So I was able to use the Cricut to cut out the styrene pieces as well as the cardstock, and I also used it to cut out these stripes here as well that represent the holes. And so we were able to take this information, make a set of drawings, handed it off to the builder, and this is our finished product. And I'm happy to say that it went together really well. So it just shows another way that you can make use of it. Any questions on that? All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about where you can get them, how much do they cost, what else do you need, okay? So I use a Cricut maker machine, and it is currently, this is currently kind of their top of the line. The previous version was called the Explorer 2, and the version before that was called the Explorer 1. They all work pretty much the same. It's just the more advanced the version, the thicker the material it will cut, and the faster it will cut as well. So I expect sometime, this one has been out for several years now, so I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see that it's eclipsed by another model somewhere down the road. But so far, this has been able to take care of pretty much everything I've been looking for. So you can get them directly from Cricut. You can also get them from Amazon and many of the major craft box stores like Joann's, Michael's, those types of things. Okay. So what you get is you get the machine, you get an interface cable to your computer, you get a fine point blade, the kind that we use for cutting cardstock, and I think you also get a scoring wheel as well. But if you want to cut some additional materials, then you need to take care of these additional accessories. So you need a knife blade and a housing. That's needed for cutting the wood. You can also cut wood with a knife blade, but I found that the deep point blade actually works better for cutting styrene. And then you want to get yourself an additional pack of standard grip cutting mats. You could also get a toolkit that has a scraper and a spatula in it, but that really isn't required. So if you added up the cost, the full retail cost from Cricut for the machine and all of these accessories, it currently comes out to about $525, and if you figure freight, you're probably looking at a capital requisition of somewhere around $550. However, at least twice a year, and fortunately now is one of the times, they have some pretty good sales. And so you should be able to get this package for less than $500 here, and usually around the 4th of July. Also, there are trade-offs. You can get it through Amazon, and obviously if you have Amazon Prime, then shipping is free and you can have it by the next day. So there are different options here. Right now, the most expensive item is the maker machine. I think its regular price is $399, but I saw the other day it's currently on sale for like $369. All right, talk a minute about the hardware and the software. Okay, it is compatible with your PC or the Apple operating systems. And you can use it from a desktop, a laptop, a mobile phone, and many of the notebook-sized computers, but unfortunately not all of the notebook-sized computers. So check with Cricut regarding compatibility if you have a question about those. You can find that right from their website. So the computer and the Cricut will connect wireless via Bluetooth, or you can do it with the USB cable if you don't have Bluetooth on your device or don't want to. Also, if you have extremely large files, so extremely large files would be like a big wall with lots and lots of window openings. It's sometimes faster with those big files to go ahead and just use the USB cable. But for everything that you see here that we created tonight, we just used it from my laptop and with the Bluetooth connection. And one other thing that they've done to the interface, which is useful, is you used to have to be directly connected to Cricut. You had to be online and go through their network to utilize the machine. But they since improved the front end such that now you can work it in standalone mode as well. Okay. So now how big can you cut? So a standard Cricut cutting mat is 12 by 12, and you can also get them in 12 by 24. But Cricut puts a 1/4 inch cutting border all the way around, so the biggest piece that you can cut is 11.5 inches by 23.5 inches. Okay. And if you need something bigger than that, then you would need to separate it into 2 parts and then glue them together. This is what I found to be the maximum practical thicknesses yet. Cardboard and foam board, you can actually go bigger than this because it's pretty soft. But as long as you can stay under the bar, the carriage bar on the machine, I'm sure it'll cut through it fine. But I've had certainly no problems 2 or 3 millimeters. Basswood siding, 1/16 of an inch. That seems to cover pretty much everything that's available commercially that you could get from like Northeastern Scale Lumber or Mount Arbor. And like I say, with the styrene, 40 thousandths is about as thick as I've seen it be able to practically cut. It takes a lot of passes to get there, so you might want to think about maybe a double wall in order to do the styrene. But it will definitely cut up to 40 thousandths. I can verify for that. If we think back to the Cooperstown depot, how long does it take to do a project like that? Well, once we've gotten everything all the dimensional data that we need off of our plan, it took us probably a couple of hours to input that into Design Space, and probably close to 3 hours to be able to cut out the prototype pieces and then the wood type pieces after that. One tip or trick that I could say is that because this is a fairly simple tool to use, you can dig it all out yourself. However, if you can sit down for an hour with an experienced user, you can definitely get a jump start on things. And that's what I would recommend. If you sat down and did our demo project with the shed wall, you could complete that easily, have all the pieces cut out in an hour, and you'd have 90% of what you need to go ahead and go off and start your own project. There are also plenty of YouTube videos out there, as well as free tutorials on the Cricut website. All right. And so on that particular piece, let me switch to one other thing I'd like to share. And that's a handout. So if we are here in a conference room, everybody would have gotten this particular handout, but Phil is going to try to put it up on the web where you can pull it down, and if that doesn't happen or you want one sooner, please contact me and I'll be glad to send you a copy. But the key information that's on here is my contact information. So if you have any questions about Cricut, you're thinking about it, you start to get into a project and you come up with some questions on what do you think are some of the options for executing that, please feel free to give me a call. I've talked to a number of people over the past couple of years, and I definitely enjoy that type of thing, so please give me a shout. Also, we've included some links for some projects that you can do, okay? So the shed front wall, the welding shed, which was the Styrene building, and the Cooperstown depot, these are the links to those projects. So once you've created your own design space account, which we talked about earlier, only takes a couple minutes and it's free, then you can load this link into your browser. It will open up Design Space and this project, and then you can just save it off to your account. And then you can go play with it. You know, you can change the window and the door openings, you can add doors, you can see what you can do there. If you decide to do something like the Cooperstown depot, then here's the information that you'd want to have. We gave you the Cricut Maker settings for all the different materials that we did, from the cardstock clear down to the styrene for the windows. Okay? And then here's the bill of materials list. And then on the last page, there's the sketch of the shed front wall. And if you wanted to give it a try, so you don't have to own a Cricut or be connected to a Cricut to use Design Space. So if you want to give it a try, go set up an account and then, you know, go in and create the shape, or pull in the link and, you know, add some windows and door openings. Play with it a little bit, and I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. One other thing I wanted to cover is people have asked me what I like best about Cricut, or why I like it as a tool. And I'll have to admit that I have tended to shy away a little bit from scratch building in the past, because I just don't have the dexterity that some of the really good modelers do. I've been frustrated because I'll spend a lot of time working on the model, and I'm always a little bit at least disappointed in the results because it didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted to. But, you know, the nice thing about Cricut is that it is very fast and it's very accurate. And so for me, it's been a really nice crutch to be able to lean on, because now I know that when my parts come out, they'll be exactly the way that I want them, and I'll be able to assemble them and move forward with confidence. Probably the second thing that it's really good for is the prototyping, as we looked at with the example of the engine house. And another area it's really good with is if you've got a lot of repetition. So if you want to make a bunch of railroad car sides and they're all identical, you know, you can just set it up to cut 10 or 20 of them and go away, and then come back and get your pieces, and it's all ready to go. So it saves you some labor there. All right, so let me go back and finish up with one other thing. right. So I think that pretty much covers most of the high points. Like I say, go out and try it. I think you'll like it. It also can be somewhat addictive. It's the type of thing where you can go out and say, well, we'll just sit down for a minute and try this and see how it could work. And the next thing you know, it's gotten real quiet in the house because everybody's gone to bed. And when you go downstairs, you find out that there's a note that says, hey, by the way, the garbage is not going to take itself out tonight. So you might run into that type of situation, but I find it to be very satisfying and very enjoyable way to spend time. So I'd like to give some thanks to a few people who have helped me along the way. Michelle Pryor's a friend of the family and a Cricut guru, and she has forgotten more about Cricut, I think, than I'll ever know. Dave Connery did all the really nice wooden styrene structures that we've seen tonight. And Wayne and Floyd helped me out with some of the scenery on the diorama, so I'll say thanks to those guys. And if there are any other questions, I'll be glad to take them at this time, and if not, then Phil, we can hand it back to you.
I just had one question. It looks like a fantastic machine to use, and I'm in N-scale.
Okay.
I want to have, do you have any idea what is about the finest cross section you can cut with that? I'm thinking like if you had to do your own windows or something, can you get down to 10 thousandths or even smaller?
Yeah, I think maybe a way to think about it is, you know, it can do pretty much whatever you can do with a knife and a straight edge and some cutting materials. So if you feel that you could cut materials down to 10 thousandths thick with the tools that you have, then Cricut probably can too. I have seen some folks actually cut out some HO scale windows with mullions in them and those type of things. And they looked okay, they were flat. It's probably one of those things where you'd want to try it. And if you're interested in trying it, get a hold of me, and I'd be glad to give it a shot, and we'll see if we can come up with what it is you're looking for.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
That was great. Ray. I think it's, you know, it's a great tool. It's so interesting that these tools that you now can use with a computer have kind of changed modeling. So yeah, it's very different set of tools. So that's basically brings us to kind of the conclusion of what planned on as kind of a formal material for tonight. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to share. And then the last thing I did want to talk about was timing for when we get together in 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. So we're skipping Thanksgiving weekend, which is next weekend, and getting together the first weekend after, which is in December. So kind of a feeling, is there kind of a preference to go back to the Saturday 9 to 11, or is this a better time? Clearly, they come at 7 to 11 or 7 to 9, so that's kind of a bit of a disingenuous question. But
Phil, I this time works great for me because I do eBay sales for our museum, the South Bay Historical Railroad Society, and Saturday morning is my pack and ship and get it to the post office by 2. So this. That's why you never see me at 9 a.m. on Saturday, but this worked nice. It's in the evening, and I find it relaxing this time of day. So just my comment.
Just out of curiosity, one of the reasons you moved to 7 o'clock was to accommodate some of our members out in Hawaii. Are there any Hawaiians here? I mean, I know we have some members in Hawaii. I just
Yeah, I don't know if that.
They were among the 19 on the list.
Oh, well. Yeah, it may be best to, maybe we'll alternate and go back next week to the morning, and then talk again about alternating back. I know it kind of makes it a little different, but as long as everybody watches the emails, we can do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Our museum alternates with our members on Zoom, and we do that for the very reason, because later in the day and evening is better for some, and sometimes morning's better for others. And we find out that we get more people participating with alternation. Yeah. Well,
and this week it also was, the NMRA-X thing happened this week as well, earlier in the day. So, we can occasionally get those other things that come in. Well, why don't we shoot? We'll shoot for 2 weeks for 9 o'clock, and they'll have the discussion about alternating back maybe to 7 o'clock, and we just do it back and forth like that. That lets more people attend. So.
Yeah, and as long as you're recording them so other people can get to them and
Right.
whatever, either that should work out either way.
yeah,
Yep.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, and Seth made a good point that I think the attendance has been a little bit higher in the morning. I think folks, so that may be another good indication. I'll go back and look. I've got the attendance data, and I'll go back and look at the attendance data. But yeah, and actually what's interesting is there's almost as many views on YouTube as there are attendees on most of these. So, it's folks are able to see it separately later. Well, good. Well, that brings us, I think, to the end of our time. So if there's nothing else, we'll call it an evening, and everyone can relax and go watch the end of the football games or something.
I have just an update on a couple of members, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Phil, guys might want to hear about. Clark Stewart is under home under home care. He had the severe stroke last December, and his son had to sell his entire collection, and he's very crippled. He's paralyzed on one side, and so he can no longer participate. And for those you may not know, I see Don Short every couple of weeks or talk to him, and Don has lost his vision in one eye. Nothing the doctors can do about it, and his other eye's not doing too good either. So he's kind of, he said if we come back to having auctions again, he's out of the picture because he just can't do it anymore. So just thought I'd give everybody an update on those two guys. It's kind of sad to see that after all the volunteer work they've done over the years.
Absolutely. Well, definitely we talk to them, wish them our best.
Yeah, I will.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, just so you guys know. Yep.
Good. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Good meeting, Phil.
Excellent. That was wonderful, Ray. I appreciate it. I hope I think we got a couple of signups for the convention, and we will see everyone in 2 weeks. Have a great couple of weeks and have an excellent Thanksgiving, and please stay safe.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Phil.
Happy
Thanks.
Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you all. Good night.